today. Our first speaker is Monica Terron, and she will talk to us about the TaLAI Project. Monica is the newly appointed director of the Media and Learning Association, where she leads the organization's strategic direction, business development, and member engagement to promote the role of media, digital technology, and media literacy in education. Monica, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Nice to see some of you that I know, so welcome. I'm going to be sharing my screen, so give me a second. Obviously, I need to always hear if you can see it, so please someone say yes. All good? Okay, excellent. All right. Well, so I've been introduced nicely by Kamachi, so thank you. I am also just wanting to point out that my role for this specific project, TaLAI, is more the dissemination type work. So that's what I'm here to do. I'm going to be disseminating information that has been gathered. Maybe for those of you who are not aware, TaLAI means teaching and learning with AI in higher education. And the goal is really to introduce innovative pedagogical approaches that ethically integrate AI into higher education. And then we have VU University, well, Friedrich Alexander Universität Erlangen-Nürnbergen. We love that name, it's very long. Then we have the Fachhochschule Südwestfalen, then of course Media and Learning, and the University of Amsterdam that are the partners in this specific project. So maybe a question to ask is sort of why this project? Generative AI has challenged traditional ideas of authorship, originality, and academic integrity. And what we found was that out of all the areas of teaching and learning, assessment is one of the most directly affected. And then perhaps good to know is that institutions and educators urgently need evidence-based guidelines to adapt to ensure assessment remains fair, transparent, and pedagogically sound. And so the main deliverables of this project are a policy guideline. I know, not another one, but believe me, there was a lot of work that went into this. So hopefully you'll enjoy some of the stuff that was figured out. So policy guidelines to help higher education institutes navigate ethical AI integrations in assessment. Then a digital platform for educators to provide guidance, digital storytelling, teaching recommendations, and discussion forums for ethical AI use in higher education. And then a MOOC, a free online MOOC that's busy in the making to train higher educational educators, digital and media literacy, and ethical AI application skills. And so just bear in mind, we're still creating the material. So if you have any insights or whatever, maybe share them in the chat. That would be nice. However, in the end, the platform and the MOOC will be fused eventually. And then TaLAI also has a research phase that took place. And this phase involved a literature review, surveys, focus groups, and a staff exchange. And the main focus of that research phase was to identify the needs, the challenges, and the opportunities. And then there was also a design phase, and this phase is really focused on developing core principles and guidelines, which is what I'm going to be sharing with you today. So the outcomes from all the meetings, surveys, and all that came to 7 core principles. I will highlight them, so bear with me. It's really important, I think, that you know that they exist, but you will also have access to them. We have a TaLAI website, which Sharon will hopefully share in the chat with you, so you can have access to them later on as well. But maybe just to point out, there are 7 core principles, and out of those core principles, detailed guidelines came about. But then at the same time, there was a need for condensed guidelines because you needed to have different audiences that you could communicate with. So moving on, here are the 7 core principles, which I'll be going through. And let's start with core principle 1. Maybe good for you to know is I will check which one you think is the hardest to implement, so pay attention if you can. So number 1, no single solution. That basically means combining multiple assessment strategies suited to the subject, learning goals, and policy context. So just remember, there's no one-size-fits-all approach to assessment, and maybe could your subject benefit more from creative projects, peer reviews, or oral tasks? And perhaps a question to ask is, which of your current assessments could you redesign or include more variety in? Then number 2 is human oversight in grading. The final decision on grades in any assessment where Gen AI tools have been utilized must always remain the responsibility of human educators. So AI can support grading, but it can't read context, empathy, or nuance. And again, a question to ask is, where do you think human judgment makes the biggest difference in your assessment? Number 3, quality control of AI-generated context. So any content, feedback, or analysis produced by Gen AI must be critically examined for accuracy, relevance, and alignment with learning objectives before being applied in assessment practices. So AI output isn't always accurate or ethical, and students may not see that. So ask yourself, how do you verify the accuracy or originality of AI-generated student work? Number 4, alignment with learning objectives and outcomes. Any new assessment initiatives, particularly those integrating Gen AI tools, must be aligned with clearly defined learning outcomes to ensure that they maintain pedagogical validity and uphold academic standards. So in other words, AI can change how students reach learning goals, but not what those goals are. And so again, what you should ask is, do your current assessments still measure the intended learning outcomes in an AI-rich context? I hope you're still with me. Core principle number 5, revision of existing policies. So the integration of Gen AI into assessment practices may necessitate revisions to existing assessment policies to ensure consistency, academic rigor, and adherence to institutional and ethical guidelines. So many academic policies were written before Gen AI even existed. So maybe one should, have a look at those and then see which institutional rule or policy needs that update to obviously reflect AI in assessment. Number 6, we have transparent communication of grading criteria. And so what this policy means principle means clear and explicit grading. Rubrics must be communicated to students to ensure they understand the assessment criteria, expectations, and the role Gen AI may play in evaluation processes. So students can't meet expectations they obviously don't understand. And so the question you should ask is, how clearly do you explain your marking criteria, and where the use of AI, and where is the use of AI acceptable and where it is not? And last but not least is the 7th principle, and that is transparency in Gen AI utilization. So if Gen AI tools are incorporated into assessment design, evaluation, or feedback mechanisms, students must be informed about how these technologies are used, their limitations, and of course, their impact on assessment processes. So students are more likely to use AI responsibly when educators model transparency. And the last question one should ask is, how could you show students your own approach in using AI tools ethically? My favorite question. So, which one of those are the hardest, in your opinion, to apply in your institution? You can just post in the chat, like which number. It could be a multiple numbers. Go for it. Spam the chat, please. That would be super handy. And in the meantime, I'm going to continue because we all need to learn how to multitask. So this is your practice opportunity. We have the condensed guidelines. We will share them. They are on the website as well. I'm just going to run through them very quickly. And that is design flexible, transparent, and innovative assessments, focus on formative, authentic, and competence-oriented evaluation, emphasize self-reflection, constructive feedback, and academic integrity, diversify assessment formats to enhance engagement and integrity, and integrate Gen AI supportively while safeguarding academic standards. So that was the sort of policymakers' high-level overview that came out of the steps and the feedback that was given. And then just so you know, there is that detailed guideline one. Don't worry, I'm not going to go through it to torture you, but it exists. If you are interested, of course, there are way more details explaining each one of them, so have a look. And then just to finish off, it's just, looking ahead. Remember, the guidelines are not static. They are living documents and adaptable to context. And obviously, we encourage dialogue. And so that's why we asked you to put some of the policies that you have in the chat for us, so that we can just maybe see what's happening over there. And if you think it's important, to work together with you, or you have some effective approaches using assessment in AI, please do reach out to us. There is an email address here, and if you want, we can directly share our emails in the chat later on. And that's me. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Monica. We still, well, while Yusette, our second speaker, maybe sets up, we can have a little bit of time for questions. But if there are none, I suggest our second speaker can start putting her slides up. So our second speaker is Dr. Josette Damen. She's a political scientist and political philosopher trained at the universities of Leiden and Oxford. She obtained her PhD at Leiden last year. Currently, she works as a postdoctoral researcher for Leiden's Institute of Public Administration, leading a project called Fair Educational Assessment in the Age of AI. Fair Assess is the name of the project. So please, Josette, go ahead.
Thank you, Kamakshi, for that introduction. Can you all see my slides right? Yeah? Good. I was really listening very interestedly to Monica's presentation. I think we have a lot of, well, I wouldn't say overlap, but like it's very compatible how we think of Gen AI use in assessment. So you might hear some things twice in my presentation compared to Monica's, but I think that's only a sign that we are on the right track with thinking how to guide Gen AI use in assessment practices. So that's also the main question in the Fair Assess project that I'm leading. Basically, we are looking at two questions, one of which is empirical, one of which is normative. So the empirical question would be, what kinds of uses of Gen AI in assessment practices in higher education are we already seeing? So what is already out there? What are we actually talking about? Then the second one is a normative question, which is, what should we do with all of this? How should we regulate these kinds of uses? What should we do as institutions with the practices that we are seeing when it comes to Gen AI use in assessment? So I'm starting with the empirical question. In what ways do students and teachers already make use of Gen AI in educational assessments? Now, to answer this question, my colleagues and I, so it's quite a big interdisciplinary project with people from multiple backgrounds. And what we did is do a literature study called a scoping review, looking at the studies that have been published over the past 5 years that had in their titles something about assessment, something about higher education, and something about AI, and see what kinds of uses of Gen AI were mentioned in all of these articles that have been appearing. And on the basis of what we found, we developed a typology of Gen AI uses in educational assessment practices. Now, before introducing that typology, it's useful to distinguish between 3 stages of assessment practices. The first one being the design stage. So this is the stage where a teacher designs an assessment. The second is the performance stage, in which the student performs on the assessment. And the final one is the evaluation stage, in which the assessment is graded or the student is given feedback. Now we found 5 types of Gen AI use that connect to these different phases. So the first type A, would be teachers using Gen AI to design assessments. So we found a lot of examples of teachers, for example, using Gen AI to generate multiple choice questions and answers for exams, Also many clinical case studies. So in medical education, it's useful for students to be able to practice on clinical cases of hypothetical patients. These can be generated with AI. Then in the performance phase, we found two types of Gen AI use. Both are students using Gen AI to complete assessments. First obvious case, type B, is when they do that without that being prescribed by teachers. So we all know the case of the student using ChatGPT to write an essay. But we also found another category, which is students who use Gen AI to complete assessments, but it's because the teachers told them to do so. So we found actually quite a number of studies where teachers practice with this. They tell their students to use Gen AI for a particular purpose in a particular way, and then often ask them to reflect on what they found. So it often has a kind of reflection component, be it ethical or academic or disciplinary, that students have to incorporate into this assessment. Now, the final phase also has two types of Gen AI use attached to it. In the evaluation phase, we see that Gen AI is used for feedback on students' performance. Either the teacher feeds the student's performance into the Gen AI that then gives back the feedback, or the student interacts directly with the Gen AI to get feedback on their performance. And the final type, and this is the most controversial one, is teachers who use Gen AI to grade students' performances. And this is controversial under EU law, and also under many regulations that higher education institutions have implemented themselves. But we do see experiments with this happening, so I did want to list it in this overview. Now, I hope this brings some order to the chaos of what kinds of uses we are seeing of Gen AI in higher education assessment practices. And now we have that order in the chaos, we can move on to the normative question, which is how to regulate Gen AI use in educational assessment practices if we want to keep these practices fair. And now here we depart from, or we start with the basic idea that an assessment practice is fair if it is regulated by principles that are fair. And we start from a number of principles that are already out there, that are already widely embraced in higher education assessment practices, either in the literature or because we see it happening at the institutions themselves. The first and most well-known one is that assessment should be valid, meaning that assessments should ensure sufficiently accurate judgments about students' proficiency with regard to the content targeted by the assessment. So if the assessment is supposed to pick up on students, say, English writing skills, then the assessment should really only target that skill and not be biased because it's actually tracking something else, because it's actually tracking, I don't know, somebody's cultural background because the instruction wasn't done in an inclusive way or something like that. So we can see that this is about ensuring that the assessment is not biased in one way or the other. Assessment should also be transparent. That means that assessments should be based on a substantive understanding of what constitutes good work that is shared by students and teachers. So the students should not be caught off guard. The teachers should also have a clear understanding about what is the standard that they're actually going to keep students to. And the final one is a bit less well known, but we also heard it briefly in Monica's presentation. Assessment should be authentic. And we understand it as assessment should ensure meaningful student engagement with assessment content in line with students' own learning interests. So an assessment should not just be targeted at these really specific tasks that are only relevant in assessment context, but they should actually enable students to apply their knowledge and their skills in ways that align with what they want to learn. So be that learn how to be the best worker in a professional environment, and also make a societal contribution, work on personal development. So that students can have different learning interests, and assessments should not just speak to one of these learning interests. That's the basic idea. Now, in order to ensure that these principles are lived up to also in the age of Gen AI, we formulated some more concrete rules, and it's useful to again attach these to the stages of assessment that we previously mentioned. So I'll start with assessment design. And the first principle that we came up with is that when designing assessments, teachers should be allowed to use GenAI only if this helps them to create assessments that allow students with diverse learning interests to meaningfully engage with the assessment content. And similarly, when designing assessments, teachers should be allowed to incorporate GenAI use by students themselves, only if this allows students with diverse learning interests to meaningfully engage with the assessment content. And with these, we mainly try to ensure that people don't use this argument of, students have to learn how to deal with AI because they will have to deal with it in the workplace later on. That's not a sufficient argument to incorporate Gen AI use, because you have to make sure that not only students who take courses specifically because they want to get a certain job out of it, but also students with other learning interests like personal development, like disciplinary knowledge, like making a societal contribution, can still get something out of the course and of the assessment that belong to it. Now, in the performance phase, the first rule that we stated says, before students complete assessments, teachers should clearly communicate with students about the question, what ways of using Gen AI, if any, are compatible with delivering good work when students complete the assessment. This has to do with transparency again, and Monica also talked about this. Then when completing assessments, students should be allowed to use Gen AI only for automating tasks that do not belong to the specific knowledge, skills, or other attributes that the assessment is supposed to pick up on. So in the example I mentioned earlier, if we have an assessment that is supposed to test students' writing skills, then students should not be automating their writing. If the assessment is supposed to pick up on students' ability to apply a certain theory to a certain problem, then maybe it's okay if students use Gen AI to perfect their spelling or grammar, because the assessment is not supposed to pick up on the writing. So it's really about thinking what is the content that the assessment is supposed to pick up on, and not letting students automate that particular content. As a fifth rule, we have when completing assessments, students should be allowed to use the support of Gen AI only if there is reasonably equal access to this support for all students in the assessment. This again has to do with validity. So if an assessment, if students who have access to much fancier tools than other students automatically perform much better, then the assessment is biased towards students with particular technological means. And we want to prevent that, just in the interest of really having the assessment focus on the right thing, so to say, which is the students' skills or the students' knowledge. Then finally, in the evaluation phase, we have a couple more rules. First one being, when evaluating student performance, teachers should be allowed to use Gen AI for assistance in feedback and grading, only if this does not reduce the accuracy of judgments about students' proficiency with regard to the assessment content. So basically, if a Gen AI tool can help with making an assessment more valid, then there's no prima facie objection to it. But if this Gen AI tool is biased, which we often see with Gen AI tools because of the data that they were trained on, then it should not be used if the bias is higher than the teacher's bias. Now, the seventh rule, when evaluating student performance, teachers should be allowed to use Gen AI for assistance in feedback and grading, only if this does not preclude the formation of a substantive understanding of what constitutes good work shared by students and teachers. It's a whole mouthful, but what we mean is that in the interest of transparency, you do want that teachers and students still engage enough with each other to have this shared understanding of what is good work. And if you completely outsource evaluation to some Gen AI, there is not that interaction anymore, and not that mutual knowledge of what do we see as good work. So this is why complete outsourcing of evaluation to Gen AI would not be compatible with transparency. Now, the eighth rule, when evaluating student performance, teachers should be allowed to use Gen AI for assistance in feedback and grading, only if the Gen AI bases its output on data capturing students and teachers' shared substantive understanding of good work. This one is supposed to draw our attention to that what students and teachers share about the conception that they share about what is good work, what is a high quality performance. That should be the basis for the evaluation and not like an external source. So for example, if I would have an essay myself, upload it to ChatGPT and ask, what do you think of this? Then the standard is just all of the data that ChatGPT bases itself on, instead of something that I fed in, as this is the mutual understanding that students and teachers reached on this content of what constitutes good work. So it shouldn't be an external source. It should the standard that the student is held to should really reflect this mutual understanding of what is good work between students and teachers. It should not be external. Now then, the final rule, when evaluating student performance, teachers should be allowed to use Gen AI for assistance in feedback and grading, only if this does not increase the opacity of feedback and grading processes for students. This is again about transparency. So one of the features of Gen AI is that it's difficult to understand for humans how exactly the Gen AI reaches its output. And if you want to have a transparent feedback and grading process on the part of the teacher vis-a-vis the student, then you can imagine that if we can't explain how the Gen AI reached its output, then the transparency is compromised. Now, on the other hand, you also can't fully explain as a teacher to a student how you reached your evaluation. So it's not as if teacher feedback and grades are completely transparent, but at least we think that the transparency shouldn't be further reduced. So the benchmark is how much can a teacher explain in terms of how they reached their evaluation. That same kind of explainability should be expected from Gen AI assisted feedback and grading. So this is what we have until now. We're not saying that this is an exhaustive list or like the final list that we come up with, but it is hopefully a starting point for higher education institutions and practitioners to ensure that assessment remains fair also in the age of Gen AI.
Thank you, Josette. We have some questions in the chat, but I suggest, looking at the time, that we move on to the next speaker and that we have some more time for questions at the end of the session. So our final talk today before the questions is a panel of 3 speakers. Dr. John Paul Freeman is an associate professor of digital strategy at the Leeds University Business School in the UK, and he's a consultant with Palfrey Ventures. Dr. Christine Ranzi is a professor in creative and open education in the School of Education at the University of Leeds in the UK, and Maria Pavlopoulou is a private language educator from modern and ancient Greek as a foreign language, and Latin, and co-founder of the educational page Hieromathesis. And she's also an author of educational books and is currently pursuing an MA in digital education at the University of Leeds. So John, Chrissy, and Maria, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this kind invitation, Monika Schön and the Media and Learning Association. And it's lovely to see so many colleagues here. I have to point out Rachel. Hello, Rachel. We used to work together. Rachel used to be my line manager also. It has been fascinating to hear, first of all, Monika and Josette, the principle, first of all. And I think what we are going to share here is applications from practice, or practical examples of how we have applied using AI from a student perspective, but also an educator perspective. Josette's presentation there on the emphasis on authentic assessment, and I think the dilemmas we have around marking with or without AI are fascinating. So yes, let's see what the conversation brings from explaining what we are doing at the moment at Leeds. So from this slide, you see, and we have labeled this AI traffic light trees. That goes back to perhaps, Monica, what you said about the chaos. That's why we have loads of traffic lights here and loads of rules and what they mean. So we hope that the examples that we will share will bring some insights from application. So we can move to the next slide perhaps and just say what the relationship is. While we were introduced, first of all, I would like to explain, Maria, what is our relationship?
Hello from me as well. My name is Maria. I'm really happy to be with all of you. I'm a student at the University of Leeds, and Chris is my supervisor in my dissertation. So
great. And we have worked together for the last 2 years now, isn't it, Maria?
True.
On a range of modules. Great, thank you. And it's lovely that you said yes to this invitation. So we have Maria's perspective, who's also an educator, obviously, but also a student at the same time. So I'm Maria's tutor, but also a student at the same time. And my tutor is one of my tutors, is the lovely John Palfreyman. So over to you, John.
Hi, everyone, and thanks, Chrissy. It's lovely to be here. Yeah, we've got a really interesting relationship between the three of us. So, yep, I'm Chrissy's tutor on a Leeds Executive Leadership Apprenticeship program, which is a postgraduate apprenticeship. And so far, I've taught her strategy for business leaders. In future, I'm going to be teaching her digital business transformation. And apart from that, I'm also I'm an advocate for generative AI responsible usage across the University Business School.
Great, thank you so much. So as you can see, there are different layers here, and we are hoping that the conversation that we are going to conduct between us will be useful. John, let's explain the traffic light system.
Okay, yeah, thanks very much, Chrissy. Yeah, I'm going to keep this really short because I actually want to maximize the time that we get in conversation in a few minutes' time. We've actually had a traffic light system in place for our assessment since 2023, and it's common across the whole university, all faculties. And it's a policy for assessment that staff and students must follow. Now, quite interestingly, around about September, I looked across all HE organisations in the UK and found that only about half of organisations actually have a policy in place, which spookily correlates really well with our poll that we did right at the very beginning. Anyway, keeping it really short, red means that generative AI usage is banned. You can't use it. It's plain and simple. Amber means that it's allowed, but within rules and guidelines set by the module leader or tutor. And green means that the students are actually taught how to use generative AI responsibly and actually encouraged to use it in the assessment. Now, just to give you some statistics, in the business school, in my faculty, in the last academic year, 85% of the assessments at undergraduate and postgraduate level were generative AI read. So we're very much stuck in the traditional way of doing things. However, the goal from the university point of view is to get all assessments in a non-controlled environment, i.e. not in an exam room, to green as soon as possible. And within the business school, we've actually made some great progress on that this year. And I'll come back to that a little bit later in the conversation. But yes, back over to you, Chrissy, for the conversation.
Great, thank you so much. And we can remove the slides now and just have that conversation in a more natural way, I think. Okay, great, Maria. Thank you, John, also for introducing the traffic light system. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to ask each other questions and respond almost spontaneously, I think. We have prepared quite a lot, but through that opportunity, actually, we have prepared something that will be turned into an article potentially. So thank you for this invitation to reflect on current practices, which will lead to something else. So thanks to you. So let's start with Maria, who is my student at the moment, and the traffic light system. Maria, how do you feel about this traffic light system? I mean, we have traffic lights on the roads, of course, but here we are learning and teaching in higher education. We talk about traffic lights. How do you feel about this?
This last couple of years, I found the traffic light system particularly useful for me. I think it offers clear guidance on how I can use or whether I can use Gen AI for my assignments. it also encourages to critically think on the kind of usage that you may need to make in any occasion. And it also reflects real world expectations on the ethical use of Gen AI. So to be clear, it's quite practical, concise, and um, I'm really content using it, and I found it particularly useful in past assignments.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's interesting to hear such a positive response. Let's go to John. What do you think?
Okay, thanks, Chrissy. Yeah, well, obviously it's been around for some time, so one could argue that Gen AI has changed a lot while the policy's been around. So it might be ready for some rework and rethink. But I would also think that it's actually better than having no policy. We've got clarity, which is always great. However, I must say that many students and also many of my academic colleagues don't actually understand the policy fully. And as a policy document, it's really a bit complicated. I think probably the most important point, though, as assessments evolve. Assessments must really evolve as we move more of them to the Gen AI green category. So, for example, a classic essay is no longer ideal for Gen AI assessment. What about you, Lucy? You've obviously looked at this from your point of view. What's your point of view in it?
Yes, I mean, it does look simple and it does look clear, and it's obvious that red is stay away from it, so don't touch it. But when we move into amber, I find it too fluffy, too confusing, because it invites wild interpretation, I would say, because we say, like you said, John, it's up to the tutor. So how the tutor may interpret amber will be very different. My personal interpretation is that students can use it. They don't have to use it if it supports their learning. Another thing is that the traffic light system in relation to AI seems to relate exclusively on assessment. What is the expectation for learning? So are we in the Wild West when we think about learning, how our students learn, and when it comes to assessment, we then put perhaps a straitjacket on that is not so helpful. So I think, while, as you said, John, it may be useful, have been useful in the past 2 years, because we needed something quick to respond to that tsunami, I think that came towards all of us. But I think it is a time to rethink what actually works better for now and what could work in a more flexible way in the future. Does this make sense, Maria? I mean, you were very positive, and you hear now 2 other educators from within the university actually being a bit more critical.
Yeah, I totally understand that US tutors have faced challenges navigating this change with the traffic light system. So, John, what do you think from a teaching perspective? How can tutors make sure that students actually understand and apply the policy correctly?
Maria, that's such a great question. I increasingly feel, as I alluded in my last answer, that the policy is often misunderstood by both teachers and students. And I think this is really compounded by all the hype and misunderstanding around Gen AI and what it can and can't do. So I think really policy always needs simplification so it can be totally understood. And, infographic formats, podcast formats, animated video formats can often be better than a really, long and tortuous document to read. And it's quite ironic, isn't it, that Gen AI can actually help us produce all of these good ways to communicate policy. I also think, though, that the learning climate's key. Students must be able to ask if they don't understand either the policy or how to use Gen AI in the module without looking silly or without the fear of looking silly in front of their peers. And I think this is also critical to move it forward.
Thank you. Maria, you are my student, and we have been working together on a number of modules where we had integrated actually AI into the learning experience, and it wasn't like something that, you can or can't use, when it comes to assessment. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about your experience on the MA in digital education, perhaps?
Yes, I would like to. Actually, I've mostly worked on assignments within the Amber category, and I totally understand that it's the most challenging one, but It worked pretty well for me. Actually, in a module, designing digital education module, I used ChatGPT and Mojo AI, both Gen AI tools, to shape my project, a Greek Gen AI Academy for Educators. Actually, this work and the use of AI within the Amber category was published in an open book called Learning with AI, showcasing innovative uses of Gen AI and also the ethical implementation of it. Overall, I think that the Amber category, although difficult to understand, might be the most useful to boost digital literacy and Gen AI literacy. Chrissy.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, Chrissy, I think your
yes.
interpretation of Amber is quite interesting, isn't it? Would you actually like to explain a bit about that?
My interpretation of Amber, I mean, for me, it's like, okay, we have a range of learning tools and AI is one of them. I would not say don't use it. I would encourage experimentation with it. And for me, that's more important. I mean, we talked about assessment, we talked about criteria for assessment, rubrics, etc. Our previous speaker, but I think there also needs to be a clear purpose. You know, why are we asking the students to engage with a specific assessment? What value does it have? Even if it's authentic, what is the value of it? What's, you know, how is that linked to the students' interests? And that is really important, what we need to pay more attention with, because when we know that the students are hooked, when we know that the students are keen to learn, when we know that there's a connection between the assessment and what the students want to do, they will not bypass thinking, they will not bypass learning. They will be keen to learn and use AI responsibly. I think that is the key for me. That is the key.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Actually, as an educator myself, I understand that tutor's role must change. And so I would like to ask both of you, from a tutor's point of view, what kind of guidance helps students use AI responsibly in Amber assignments? What about you, John?
Well, to be really honest, Maria, I'm not the biggest fan of Amber, but I can certainly see its usefulness, particularly given the clarity that Chrissy gives it in her teaching practices. So I think, you know, clarity is the key word for me. I think with clear, practical, understandable examples of where Gen AI can be used and where it can't, then that's what's critical to make Amber work.
Yeah. What about
But
you,
that's
Chrissy?
quite difficult. Yes, thank you. That's quite difficult, isn't it, to be clear at the time where we are all learning. We are all learners, Maria, in this. You know, I can't claim that I'm an expert of AI. I'm sure John isn't. But I think through that active experimentation, also with our students and being transparent about it, which we have been, Maria, if you remember, you know, when I use AI, I actually even provide all the prompts. And in the new module, we have co-designed with you and other students. We have made available, you know, very transparently what the process was and how we reached, you know, the outputs, how they have been generated. So I think being transparent is really, really important for me.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we have talked a lot about the amber. Let's go to green maybe and then finish with that if we have a little bit more time. Is that okay?
Yes, I think just 1 more minute, if that's
Okay,
possible.
just
Okay.
maybe we'll ask John, because John has been a pioneer in green assignments at the institution, at least in the business school. So, John, over to you. What was your rationale for going straight into green?
Yeah, I'll keep it brief, but essentially, Chrissy, great question. Employability. I do see that this is an essential skill, irrespective of the sort of job that people are going to go into for the future. And so I've been using Gen AI Green in assessment since late 2024. And since then, I've actually led 7 postgraduate modules of Gen AI Green and also helped colleagues overcome the sort of challenges and fear of doing the same. And I'm currently helping colleagues build flagship Gen AI Green modules. I ensure that the assessments are really real world case study oriented, and they always include an element of reflective practice on Gen AI usage, especially learning from when it goes wrong and when they could make it do better in future. I've also found that most students really embrace Gen AI Green. They sort of say things like, "Oh, you know, we're being trusted. We're, you know, it's no longer regarded as cheating." the use of Gen AI, and modules described as breath of fresh air, which is great. So I think, you know, promoting responsible usage is what it's all about. And I also see that aligning brilliantly with the set of principles that we looked at earlier in the previous discussion.
Great, that's fantastic. And it did really feel, because I was a student on one of John's modules, so it really felt liberating. And I definitely didn't reach out as, oh, how can I take shortcuts here? Because I'm a keen learner. You know, I found the assessment, first of all, useful. I could take it into a direction that was of value for me personally. So I just used it as a tool and collaborator to further expand my understanding and put something together that would be useful for me going forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chrissy, Maria, and John. I just want to come back to some questions. I think we have about 5 minutes for questions of the whole session. Some of the participants, I think one of the key themes that came up throughout the questions for over all 3 presentations is this aspect of control or alignment, that you can have all kinds of policies and recommendations, but how do you, within your different roles as educators, teachers, students, you know, follow those roles, but also how do you as an institution possibly, well, keep in check or control that those roles are being used as they, you know, as they are kind of advised. I don't know if there are any reactions to this, or if you could comment on this from your experience in your institutions. Maybe I come to first, yes, Josette.
Yeah, this is something that I find interesting to think about, because one part of the project that I'm leading that I haven't talked about so far is that the way we want to go about it at Leiden University is by having a sort of deliberative democracy process, whereby ultimately we're going to formulate principles and rules for Gen AI use in assessments bottom up with the students and teachers of our own university. So I have thought up all of these nice principles and rules. But it's not that these rules are going to be the ultimate policy, because what I'll be organizing is a deliberative assembly with students and teachers that are a representative sample of the university. These are going to engage in discussion spread out over 4 days and talk through all of these principles and talk through all of their own experiences with Gen AI, and then formulate rules that might or might not align with what I have thought up. So it's also a challenge for me that it's not going to be per se my policy, but I hope that because it will be formulated bottom up, it will have like more uptake also from the student and teacher body.
I'm just wondering, Chrissy, John, or Maria, do you have any thoughts about this type of approach to making maybe an alternative version to your traffic light system?
Happy to, John, do you want to go first? Chrissy. Happy to go first. I'm very much in favor of democratic approaches, being Greek. But democracy is, you know, something that we all need and will create much richer participatory ways of living together, learning together, and assessing potentially together as well. So democracy is really important. Another point to mention is that innovators don't expect or don't follow rules, don't follow policies. They go for it regardless. So any policy, I would say, needs to be really flexible, elastic almost, that could bend and mold into a wider range of practices without reducing the need, obviously, for quality assurance, for adhering to specific principles. But within that loose framework, there needs to be a space, freedom space, I would say, for exploration, for responsible and ethical exploration. John?
Yeah, if I could follow on from that, Chrissy, I'd like to say that, first of all, I'm not a great fan of black and white rules. I'm much more a fan of like principles and guidance, really. The difference between a roundabout and a set of traffic lights. Roundabout's much safer in practice by actually giving people guidance. And I think that's appropriate for Gen AI usage and Gen AI usage in assessment. I think trusting people to do the right thing, obviously monitoring to make sure they do, but also, realizing that we're working in quite complex organizations, so we've got to navigate through that complexity. So I think, guidance and principles are much more useful in this space at this time.
Thank you. Thank you. Maybe another theme that came up in the questions is this aspect of authentic tasks and authentic assessment. I was wondering from your experiences if you maybe have some tips for our audience on how do you then design these tasks, what have you seen as different from possibly before the age of generative AI?
Who are you asking?
Well, maybe we start again. Maybe this is a question for the TaLAI group. I don't know, Julia or yeah? Oops, Julia, could you take the floor?
Yes, from the TaLAI project, we didn't. That's not what we investigated too much.
Oh, okay, sorry.
So
I'm sorry, I missed.
No, we have
really
like our own experiences
Yeah.
at the University of Amsterdam. So this morning I was at a talk accidentally by the exam committee from our university, and they were talking about a two-lane approach. So to combine assessment formats that you can use Gen AI in, and assessment formats that are that you cannot use AI. They're like in classroom settings, in exam settings. So to use a combination of both to do have authentic assessments as well, and to how do you say it? To have like a varied mixture of different assessment formats.
Yes.
And in the chat, I can also put in an article about thesis writing and how we are dealing with that.
Okay. Yes, that would be very useful. Thank you so much. I think we're nearly at the end of our session today. Before we close, I would like to very much thank all the speakers for joining today and all the interesting presentations. I do have a few more announcements on the upcoming events of our of the Media and Learning Association. So here are some of the next webinars and workshops that we will organize throughout October till December. We have a live discussion with Richard Mayer on multimedia learning in January, and please do have a look at this, because you can submit some of your questions that you would like to ask him in the you'll find details on our social media and on our website for this. And of course, we have our conference in June next year, for which you can also submit proposals in the coming months. Oops, yes, and these are our proposals. You find all the details on our webpage for this. I'd also like to invite you to join our special interest groups, which are for members of the association. So if your organization is a member, you can join us. These are the special interest groups that we have running now. And if you're interested in joining as a member, please do get in touch as well. as I mentioned, we also have a newsletter, and if you're interested in submitting any articles or news items, also through our website, you can suggest some content, and we'll get in touch with you. Yes. So thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed our session today, and please do get, hopefully we see you in another session very soon. Thank you.